second and final time last night, I missed the opportunity to see Primus once again. And the reason I'm saying it's the final time because I am not going to allow anything to get in the way of me seeing Primus or any other band that I intend to go see in the future. It is totally on me. It is me being slack, so I have no one to blame but myself for missing it. But let me get into the background about why I'm even bothering to post a video about missing a show. The first time I even heard of Primus was back in early 1991. As I've said in these other videos, I've always just kind of, in my youth, not these days, but when I was younger, I would always be out there looking for new bands, looking for new music. I would just be scouring the earth for more music. And I heard about Primus, and then of course they had a video on MTV that got a lot of rotation, which was Jerry Was a Race Car Driver. And I said, cool, I'm in, I'm gonna check them out. So I started, like I do with most bands that I get into, I just start from the very beginning. So I picked up Frizzle Fry. I'd heard a little bit of Suck on This, and I picked up Frizzle Fry and immediately just fell in love with this band. Les Claypool is one of a handful of bassists that I consider to be a hero that I briefly met. I'll get into this in a later video, but I had the opportunity, thanks to my old bandmate and lead singer, Ian. He connected me with Chuck Rainey. If you don't know who Chuck Rainey is, Chuck Rainey played bass with Donald Byrd, but most notably with Steely Dan. He played on those classic Steely Dan albums like The Royal Scam and Asia, and I mean, man, Chuck Rainey is hands down, he's definitely one of my heroes. Cliff Burton, of course, I never had the opportunity to meet him. But yeah, so briefly meeting Les Claypool and him being super cool. Didn't get to shake hands with him, but the fact that he turned around and acknowledged my existence and, gave one of his classic Les Claypool kind of responses saying, "What's happening?" I really feel very fortunate that I've been able to meet some of these people, sit down and talk to some of them. Like I said, once again, it was very brief with Les Claypool. But just going out and seeing bands that you really admired growing up, and it was like going to a clinic, for all instruments. You were going to a clinic, and we used to have this club. I mean, actually, we still have it here in Atlanta, but it's changed locations. It's called the Masquerade. And the first show I saw at the Masquerade, I believe this was the very first show that I ever saw at the Masquerade. This would be the Toasters, which is a ska group. From there, I just started dropping by the Masquerade to see bands. The Masquerade was kind of like the successor to the Metroplex. We had this legendary place here in Atlanta called the Metroplex where tons of bands played. I never got to go there. It was a little bit before my time, so by the time I was able to actually get rides and even drive to concerts, the Metroplex had already burned down. But lots of legendary bands played there. I mean, you name it. They just, whenever they'd come to Atlanta, they would play the Metroplex. So the Masquerade kind of took over as being the premier spot for a lot of up-and-coming bands in the late 80s and early 90s. So, like I said, I went on to see so many bands there. I mean, I wish I could, from the Toasters to Juliana Hatfield, I saw them there. Jellyfish, gosh, I mean, and then you could meet the bands because they'd be hanging around there because it was just like it was a club, and it had different levels to it. So it had Purgatory and it had Heaven and Hell. And Heaven is where most of the bands would play at the Masquerade. So I decided I was going to go see Primus. I had my mind made up, but I didn't buy the tickets in advance because usually if you got there in well enough time, you could normally get into, I never ran into ever having a show sell out on me when I was trying to go see a show. Primus was the very first time I'd ever gone to see a band live and not be able to get in. And I just couldn't accept it. I sat there with my friend Joey and looked at all of our friends over there. They were up on the balcony and they're waving at us like, Primus is getting ready to go on, get in here. and we could not bribe this guy. We couldn't pay him enough to let us into the show. After a while, there were so many people standing out there that wanted to get in to see Primus, and by the time we went to go see them, they were on tour for Sailing the Seas of Cheese. This guy finally got frustrated. He says, listen, I gotta imitate this guy. He goes, look, there is no hope. Go home. You'll never get in. Sold out. That was it. And at the time, Les Claypool was my hero. Like, I was like, oh my God, I have to see this show. I must have stood out there for almost the entire show trying to get in, and we never got in. I don't know. I was just terribly disappointed at that point. By the time I finally got to see Primus, which I didn't have to wait much longer to see them, but I was like, I have to see them. They were coming on tour, opening up, supporting one of my other favorite bands and another hero of mine, Geddy Lee, with Rush in 1992. I believe this is March 4th, 1992. Rush was on tour for Roll the Bones. By the time we got there, I think they had already probably gotten into their set a little bit, so only caught like a handful of songs. It was very disappointing. I was just like, come on. And I don't like arena shows anymore. And back then I was just starting to really get tired of arena shows. I was about 2 years out from saying, you know what, no more arena shows unless it's like a bucket list band that I must see. So I ended up catching Primus, I believe it was Lollapalooza 93. I saw them again, and they were one of, if not the headlining spot on this show. I learned a big lesson from that show. I always thought about that show whenever I wanted to go see a band. Actually, there's two bands that made me do this. Primus was one of them, and before Primus, Nirvana. They came to the Masquerade, and this was before Nevermind broke, and I had a group of friends, and we were gonna go see this band, and they backed out at the last minute. It was on a school night, I believe it was like on a Wednesday night or something. Anyway, they backed out. And when they backed out, I chickened out because I didn't want to go downtown by myself. I was 17. I just didn't want to do it. And I never got the opportunity to see Nirvana ever again because the next time they came after that show, they were playing at a place called the Omni, which is an arena show. And at that point, I said, I refuse to watch them in an arena. They're not an arena band. I mean, even though I know the Foo Fighters do what they do, and I went and saw the Foo Fighters in an arena, but I just didn't want to go at the time. Thought I would have more opportunities, and I was devastated to find out when Kurt Cobain had died. It was just devastating to me because I was like, man, I didn't get to see them. And I was pretty much haunted for many years after that because I kept thinking about that night when I chickened out, because I think about some of the other nights that I just decided to go to a show by myself if other people couldn't make it. I'm like, I'm just going to go see this band alone. It's kind of funny because I've never gone to a movie by myself, never gone to a movie theater alone. But I've seen several bands by myself because I just had to go see them. But anyway, back to Primus. You know, for me, being a bassist, switching over from playing guitar to bass and doing what I was doing at the time, I just felt like the bass was taking a back seat to everything. Even though the bass was so loudly heard in so much music, people just almost didn't realize that they were hearing the bass do so many things. Even with Metallica, there are things that I still learned, or that I've learned even recently, that Cliff Burton was doing on those earlier recordings that I thought was the guitar, and it was actually Cliff. So I'm kind of embarrassed to know that. I mean, but at the same time, like I told you before, Cliff Burton is the reason I picked up the bass. To be a bassist in the late 80s, early 90s, let's just face it, the early 90s, the bass was very important to the band. I mean, I think all the instruments are important, but the bass wasn't getting the recognition that it really deserved until Primus came along. Primus really made people wake up and see the bass again. So that's why Les was definitely a hero of mine, and this led me to buy this bass. Like, I bought this bass because I was pretty much copying Les Claypool. He made me get into the fretless and so when I heard, you know, things like, I'm probably playing it in the wrong key, but I mean, just stuff like that. I was like, wow. When I heard Toys, I was just like, are you kidding me? And when Primus came out with their Miscellaneous Debris, this is another gateway to my favorite band right back here. They, Primus, cover Making Plans for Nigel by the XTC, which is my all-time favorite band. And I will get more into that later. As these videos go on, I'm gonna start telling you why XTC is just the band for me. They've been my favorite band since 1997, and I've just never changed from that. In Les Claypool's playing, you can hear a lot of influence from Colin Moulding, the bassist of XTC, and you hear a lot of Geddy Lee in his playing. But he has his own style. He's so unique, and that's what makes me love bands like Primus, bands like XTC, because you hear or better yet, a band that loves XTC, the Dismemberment Plan, an old indie band. I mean, you can hear that these guys love, especially this band right here, XTC, and you hear it, but it's not plagiarism. You know, you hear some of these bands and they do these songs and you'll be like, wow, they directly ripped that riff from this other band. Now, I know there's the beginning of To Defy the Laws of Tradition, where I think it's a... But anyway, you hear the influence, but it's not straight up plagiarism, and I think that's pretty cool. But yeah, this bass here, a good 2 to 3 years, this was my main bass. I didn't play any other bass except for this bass. I had a P bass, but I mainly would show up everywhere with this bass. I didn't do anything but play this bass. For a while, I felt like I knew my instrument really well, unlike today, because I haven't actually played this thing in a while. This bass, I ended up taking well, let me get back to the point. I kind of went back and forth and I'm like, do I want to go see Primus with everything that's been going on? I kept going back and forth, and I had some things going on with, you know, my business, and I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to make it. So I decided to play it and wait till the last minute, like I did with all these legendary shows. Like I said, back in the day, we just were thinking about it. I remember my friend Kurt, we would always go to all these shows together, and we were out somewhere one night and he's like, hey man, Green Day's playing tonight. And this was before Green Day blew up with Dookie and everything. He's like, you want to go check them out? I'm like, yeah, let's go. We went by there, we got in. The show ended up selling out, but we made it in. So like I said, back to that show, that Primus show, that's the only show that I got stuck outside and couldn't get in. And I felt all that rushing back to me when I showed up at the Roxy, at the Coca-Cola Roxy last night, and walked through the rain to get up to that box office, and they told me that it was sold out. I just felt all those memories rushing back to me again, and I thought to myself, I have no excuse. I have no one to blame but myself, because I had this whole thing where I was gonna film some of that show and play some of those Rush licks in there and talk about that stuff, and now but that was what I was gonna do, and I just thought it was really interesting that the first time I finally got to see Primus was opening up for Rush, and here they are back here in Atlanta doing a tribute to Kings, which was a farewell to Kings, and I missed it. And I have no one to blame but myself, but every band I've ever really wanted to see and I've gone out of my way to go see them, I always succeeded. I always got to see them, and it was always a great experience. It's always been a learning experience. Just like I told you, the albums are like the books, and going to see them live, it's like the seminars for people who are not really connected with music or don't really understand. It's like when you go, that's your clinic. That's like, you know, a bass clinic, drum clinic, vocal clinic, guitar clinic, whatever, keyboard clinic, whatever instrument, horns, whatever it may be, it's, you know, it's inspiration that backs up your influence. And I just feel like every once in a while when I go and see these bands, even though I don't frequent concerts like I used to, even before the pandemic, when I was going and getting back out there again and starting to see bands and going to see all these old metal bands again, and then going to see bands like Quicksand and Swerve Driver and stuff like that, it was like really invigorating. It was giving me that rush again, and I haven't felt that in so long, and I needed that last night, and I didn't get it because, once again, myself, I was given plenty of warnings. I had friends contact me. Several friends told me, hey man, Primus is coming. They're gonna do a Farewell to Kings. That's right up your alley. I knew you would be into that. And I knew this, and I just didn't make up my mind at the last minute that I wanted to go. And once again, 30 years later, from 1991 to 2021, I get denied for the second time ever in my life, and the second and final time, and I will never let that happen again. So I'm gonna go on and wrap this video up because I think it's gonna be fairly long. Please let me know if you like Primus, or if you have any stories about seeing Primus, if you saw any of their other legendary shows, like when they played Frizzle Fry from start to finish. If you have anything you would like to share, I would love to hear about it. Like, my original idea for this channel was to have some of my music listening or former bandmates on here, and we were gonna just basically reminisce about all those days. And unfortunately I couldn't put things together, so I just had to go with it. So what I'm basically saying is I love to have conversations with people about music and about bands. I love talking about that. I have a lot to share, and I know that all of you do. And I thank you for watching this video, and I'll have another one out to you sooner than later.